morning. Good to see you here at Sunlight. We're so glad that you're here today. I want to welcome all those watching online today. Thank you for being here. We're excited that you chose to worship with us wherever you're at in the world today. We've been, over the last several weeks, we've been working through this new series called Wisdom Through the Proverbs. And we're taking the wisdom that Proverbs gives, and then we're taking the book of James and what James says about faith and how wisdom and faith connect together. And so we've been really excited about that. The first week, we set out a foundation for wisdom and what that looks like. And last week, we talked about what faith and wisdom looks like through trials and through discipline, or what we said was training in a person's life. And so I'm really excited this week as we continue this series and looking about what faith does and how it works in our lives. Proverbs chapter 11, verse number 30, it says that the fruit of the righteous is a tree of life, and the one who wins soul, and the one who is wise, saves lives. Right. That's a pretty powerful verse, and we're going to unpack that today. We're going to look at how that verse connects with James chapter number 2, if you want to find that in your Bible, James chapter 2, verses 14 to 17. And I'm going to give you kind of our big idea, what we're going to talk about today, right from the start, just so you have an idea of what we're going to get at today. It's simply this. It's that the life that we live, it's not about us, right? The life that we live is not about us. Wisdom and faith aren't just about what you believe, but about the life you produce for others. That's what this is about. We'll say it often around here. We're not saved from our good works, but we are saved for good works. Our life should produce something. I'm really excited. Pastor Zach told you he's not able to be here today. I'm not excited that he's not here. I'm really sad he's not here. But I'm excited about what's going to happen because Zach is not here. Today we're going to sit down. We're going to talk about these two passages together with just an incredible human being. His name is Jary Reed. He's one of our pastors here. And so would you give a warm welcome to Pastor Jary Reed as he comes up today? He's got to take the long walk. We moved the steps on him.
There's no entrance over there.
Yeah,
you guys tricked me.
We moved the steps on him. Jary is one of our pastors here. One of his big roles right now, currently, is that Jary is our next generation's pastor, meaning he oversees our student ministry. So if you have a teenager from grade 6 to 12, man, I would encourage you guys to get your teenagers to The Crew on Tuesday night, 6 o'clock, 6:30. They officially start. Kids are usually running around there at 6 o'clock. And having a good time, and then you guys end around 8. Is that correct?
8:30.
8:30.
9:30.
And
10.
So yeah. But anyway, listen, Jary, to start off today, would you just mind just giving people a little bit about your background, so we can understand why you're so wise and why it's good to have you up here today?
Probably not that wise. A lot of it's age. Preacher kid, missionary kid. That'll screw up anybody. Grew up first few years in Africa, Liberia, and then I kind of wandered as my dad went to school. We ended up in Miami. So Miami's been home on and off until the last 2 years ago when I moved up here. The only time I left is different occasions to go back to school. So grew up in a Christian home that was old-time religion, pretty fundamentalist. Told you this before. No movies, clearly no alcohol. That'd get you a first-class ticket to hell. No cards, couldn't even play, no face cards. We could play Rook. Somehow you could bend the rules for Rook. Went to a Christian school where they were real big on the length of your hair. And if you ever said a bad word, you were really in trouble. So I think in response to that, I am a recovering fundamentalist, as they say. I will always be. But I think I've moved from a world of legalism to one of grace, and that would probably be, if I have anything to say, it would be grace trumps the rules.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you, Jary, for filling us in so we understand where you're coming from and can kind of get a little foundation for you. Being the fact that you're jumping in now, week 3, this is your first week on stage with us here talking about this, could you maybe just give us a little bit of your insights on the book of Proverbs and what you think about Proverbs, and then maybe James and how that connects and put those all together, just to kind of maybe catch people up who haven't been here, but also just so we can get some of your thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, we've got lots of slides. It's just serendipitous that they just happen to be what we need. The book of Proverbs is about wisdom. There, if you look at how the Old Testament holds together, you'd say the Hebrew Scriptures, after the exile, a group of people, you'd say men in that culture, came along and they really emphasized the wisdom part of Scripture. You can see in the book of Deuteronomy, we argue that Moses wrote this, but somewhere along the line, somebody came along and added 50-something verses that are not Moses. Talks about Moses' death. Talks about Moses being the most humble man in the world. You do that, you've just disqualified yourself. And so they add wisdom. Well, what is wisdom? Wisdom is really living in relationship to who God is and the law of God. So I have it up here. If you look at Proverbs 1:7, the key phrase, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. It's not like you're afraid of God, but it's putting him central in all that you do. I had a friend in high school, I forget what the car was, late 70s, so it was a cool car. And he got it painted, aquamarine was the color. He got it painted, got the seats redone. The only thing he never worked on was the engine. So the thing didn't run. Like, it's backwards. The law of God is the engine that makes the world run, whether you are a Christian or not a Christian. So you see here the fear of the Lord, and it's God's law that governs the world, but it's not just for Christians. It's not the 10 Commandments. You do these 10 things and God will be pleased. It's not God's commands in Exodus that are larger. It's the entire world exhibits the law of God. So you can learn about, like if you look at Proverbs, you can learn about the law of God from Scripture. Clearly, that'd be our main source. From other people. Listen to people who are older than you. And you don't have to be older to be wise. You can learn a lot from kids. From experience. Don't do this because I'll tell you what happens. You can even learn it from nature. Some of the greatest examples to me of God's love for us are my animals. As I see how they're dependent on me, and I think, oh, that's how God works with me. And so the law of God is hardwired in the world for everybody. The book of Proverbs then picks it up. We say the book of Proverbs then is a wisdom book, and Solomon is given credit for it. Now, he only writes 2 out of the 5 parts. There are other sections that are written, and some of it is even the wisdom of Egypt that has been incorporated, it looks like, into the book of Proverbs, because wisdom is universal. And so they put together this book, and so we give credit to Solomon. Why Solomon? That's the question. Why Solomon? What? Yeah, he's the wisest, supposedly the wisest guy that ever lived. The wise guy. But he's a horrible character. Like the first 2 chapters of Kings, he's a bad dude. He uses wisdom, but it's to kill a bunch of people. Then he prays to God and says, I'm just a little child, give me wisdom. God gives him wisdom, but then you get to chapter 8, after the dedication of the temple. Another dream comes from God, and God says, if you stay with me, we're good. If not, we're in trouble. Well, he chooses we're in trouble. And by chapter 11, he totally rejects all of this. So the wisdom, though, is of Solomon, because even though he's flawed, which everybody is flawed, he's the best example we have. The purpose then is that we might live more in alignment with God's way. That's what, if you read Proverbs from Solomon's perspective, it's how to live in accordance to the law. Here's what you should do. The foundation, the fear of God, as found in the law. But there's another character. And then I'll stop after 2 more slides, I think, and you get to breathe. His name is Jesus. He messes up everything. We can't read the book of Proverbs in light of Solomon. We have to read it in light of Jesus. Here's why. You look at Matthew 12. In Matthew 12, if you know the book, the whole goal is to present Jesus as the rightful king of Israel. And so it goes back to Abraham, starts with Abraham, and then it goes to how Jesus is the rightful son of David, just like Solomon was. But he is the greater son of David. So in Matthew 12, people are asking about a sign. Jesus has done something. They said, you're doing this from Satan. And he refers to the Queen of Sheba. And he says, she came from the ends of the earth to see Solomon's wisdom, but now the English says something, the Greek can read someone. Greater than Solomon is here. Matthew says, you want somebody greater than Solomon? You look to Jesus. And Paul picks this up in 1 Corinthians 1. And he says, if you just look at the last line, he says, Christianity is it's just silly. If you're not a Christian, you ought to look at Christians and say, this is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard of. This dead guy got up and walked. You guys believe that? And you follow a book that's just this old, and yet Paul says the foolishness of men is used by God because that's his wisdom. We preach Christ crucified. He says it's a stumbling block to Jews, it's offensive to Greeks, but it's Christ who is the power of God and the wisdom of God. So what we find out is Solomon teaches wisdom. Jesus is wisdom. It's different. So Jesus in the book of Proverbs then, the writer's not Solomon, the writer's Jesus. There's a human author, but always behind the human author is a divine author, the God himself, even Jesus. So as we read Proverbs, we read it not in light of Solomon, we read it in light of Jesus. He is the great king. He is wisdom himself. What's the purpose? The purpose is not what we should do, but what we will do. It's a change. It's not a do this and be good. It is you will, because Christ is your king. This is how you'll begin to respond. So it's that we might live more in alignment with Jesus, who is God's law. That's the goal. In fact, James will say it's the law that gives freedom. What's God calling us to? Freedom. But not freedom to just do whatever you want. That's not freedom. That's slavery. It's called addiction. The freedom we have is the freedom to live as God has created us to live. That way you wake up in the morning, everything you would say would be honoring God. There's freedom. You say whatever you want. You can do whatever you want. Why? Because filled with the Spirit of God in a perfect scenario, this is how you would live. The foundation is the fear of God as motivated by the Son, by the Spirit of Christ. Here's the difference. Proverbs says, do this, and God will be pleased. Jesus says, I filled you with my Spirit. Do this, and you will be free, because God is already pleased. See the difference? I think we get a break. Let's find out. Oh, then we go to James. We can come back to James. Time for you to talk. I'm done.
Yeah, we can come back to James for
You
sure.
guys bored yet? You all right?
Yeah. Let's jump into Proverbs 11:30 a little bit.
Oh, let's do it.
Because Proverbs uses this really powerful image, if you will, this tree of life. You know, the fruit of the righteous is a tree of life in there. So when we think about that, that ultimately tells us that wisdom is not just for us. It doesn't just help us, but it also helps other people, right?
Yeah.
Because it's producing fruit. It blesses everybody else around us. So let me ask you this, Jerry, this question. When you hear Proverbs say that the fruit of the righteous is a tree of life, what picture comes to your mind?
All right, here we go. If you read this chapter, I put 31 in there too because it sort of completes it. You read these verses, man, they just jump out. So let's read it, and then I'm going to give some background, and we'll come right back to it. So the fruit of the righteous is a tree of life. Tree of life, Genesis, sound familiar? There's a tree of life there. And the one who is wise, wisdom, saves lives. Okay, that's pretty clear. If the righteous receive their due on earth, how much more the ungodly and the sinner? So that's what we're working with. 3 ways you can read the book of Proverbs. If you're not a Christian, you can read the book of Proverbs. It talks about laziness. It talks about don't be the sluggard. It talks about wisdom and foolishness. And everyone on this planet can use a good dose of that. You can also read it moralistically. This is what I grew up with. This is the moralistic Christian reading. And here's the idea. God saved you. You've been justified. Just as if I'd never sinned. You've been declared righteous. Your guilt's been removed. But when it comes to becoming like Christ, you better get your act together. Sanctification. But it's up to you. So, quit doing this, quit doing this, quit doing this. So I had a grandfather who became a Christian, but it sounds like he was an alcoholic. And boy, did he get lectured by his wife not to ever drink again. I don't know what happened. I barely knew him, except he became a minister. So he probably didn't drink except on Sundays after the sermon. I don't know. So the moralistic one is, you read the book of Proverbs and you say, all right, it talks about the tongue. I'm never, ever, ever. I had a bad dream the other night where I was getting beat up, physically beat up, and I responded. I started fighting this guy. I don't know where this came from. And everyone in the room started calling me the one who started this thing. And I left, and I said, I'm going to the airport. And I started walking away, and I woke up, and I started thinking, I'm never going to tease anyone in my life again. I'm never, because I like to do that. And that's the moralistic, I'm not. But you can read it, a Christ-empowered reading. Here's the difference. When you look at justification, it's the work of God. We all agree with that. When you look at sanctification, becoming like Christ, that's also the work of God. We don't sanctify ourselves. It's not all of a sudden, get your act together. There are things in your life that are bigger than you can handle. It's the Spirit of God who is moving us towards freedom, which is being like Christ. I don't love people very much, I don't think, but I certainly love them more this year than I did last year. Unless you're a driver on 95 that has New Jersey plates. And then you're off the table. Proverbs 11:30 and 31. Now look at this. This is the coolest thing. Let's read it in light of Solomon. Solomon says this: the fruit of the righteous, the one who does what is right, who obeys the law, is a tree of life. You say, yay, I want to be a tree of life. I want to have fruit. The one who is wise saves lives. Oh, look, if I do this, I will be instrumental in people's lives. That's all pretty good, right? And then you read 31, if the righteous receive their due on earth, how much more the ungodly and the sinner? Here's a little warning. And if you don't do that, man, as the good guys get the good stuff, the bad guys are going to get the bad stuff. So get your act together. It's sort of a pre-warning before you get a detention from the teacher. But if we read it in light of Jesus, the fruit of the righteous is a tree of life, and the one who is wise saves lives. Jesus is wisdom, right? So he saved lives. How did he save lives? Help me. He went to the cross. The fruit of the righteous is a tree of life. In this case, the fruit of the righteous, who is Jesus, the wise one, is a tree of life. The cross was the tree of life. That's where life comes from. He saved through the tree of life, but for Jesus, what did it become? A tree of death. So for us, Proverbs says, be righteous so you can be a tree of life. In light of Jesus, the fruit of the one who was righteous was being treated as if he was not righteous, and the tree of life became a tree of death in order that he could save lives. You see how he turns it upside down? And then you go to verse 31. If the righteous, to Jesus, received their due on earth, did Jesus receive his due on earth? You say no because he's righteous. The answer is yes, because he took on our sin. He became the fool in Proverbs. He became the sluggard. He became the unfaithful husband. He became all of these things. Why? Because he went on the tree of death. So he received his just due on earth because he took on our sin. But because of that, how much more the ungodly and the sinner, that's us. Because he took that on the cross, we actually get the good stuff. It's reversed. So now, in him being righteous and taking on our unrighteousness, now we are seen as righteous, and we now are those who you say, how does this affect us? Now we have been influenced by the tree of life, filled with his Spirit. We are the one that God uses. It's the fruit in us: love, joy, peace, patience, goodness, kindness, self-control. These are the things the Spirit's working in us in order that we might be a tree of life, that we may bear fruit, that God may use us as he's in his plan of redeeming people to himself, whether little kids or 113-year-olds. Does that make sense? I think it's the coolest thing. It just flips it all over. So it takes away that moralism and says it's not you, it's God. Get a grasp of who you are. Whether you think it or not, you're the fool who's been called wise. You're the one who hates who's been called a lover. You're the one who's alone who's been given a family. You're the one who should not bear any fruit but should bear punishment. But instead, God has called you a tree of life because Jesus himself, the tree of life, died in your place.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Preach it, brother. And now for the offering.
Yeah. That's the fundamentalist in him right there coming out, yeah.
What's that?
That's the fundamentalist in you coming out.
Yeah. That's fundamentalist. Yeah. You know, in fundamentalism, though, the preacher gets 20%. So make it a good Sunday, would you? I want to buy a new table, I think. I just decided that, so come on.
That's awesome. So you kind of answered a question I had for you about the fruit, you know, what that is. And you talked about that love and the joy and the peace. Galatians 5. If you're not familiar with it, Galatians 5, you look that up later and study that. But, and again, in looking at Proverbs 11 in the light of Jesus, like when we produce that fruit of righteousness, we're not producing that so that people are like, man, that Jary Reed's a good guy.
Yeah.
You know, but we're doing it so that people will be like, man, the one who saved Jary's life is a pretty cool guy.
Yeah.
That's what we want. We're trying to push it so that people don't see us, but they see Jesus in us. That the fruit that we're producing is going to push people to the tree of life that is Jesus.
Yeah.
Is what we're trying to do. Let's
good.
jump into the book of James now.
All right.
And look at that, because James really connects this for us and pulls it together. He takes it from another angle, because James says, in James, he says that faith without action is dead. Yeah. And so in other words, if wisdom produces fruit, faith produces works. And both of those things should be life-giving, right? Let's look at that. I don't think we have James
here we go.
on there.
We got it, baby.
Do we have James on there?
Of course.
Yes,
look at that.
There it is.
Look at that. Just
James chapter 2.
Coincidentally. All right, James 2. These are our verses, so we're going to read them here. What good is it, my brothers? This is James, the brother, the actual brother of Jesus. I guess half-brother. What good is it, my brothers and sisters? The text just says brothers, but we are gender inclusive here. If someone claims to have faith but has no deeds, it's often translated works, but the NIV put deeds. Can such faith save them? Suppose a brother or sister is without clothes and daily food. If one of you says to them, go in peace, keep warm and well fed, but does nothing about their physical needs, what good is it? In the same way, faith by itself, if it is not accompanied by action, is dead. All right, let's get some James stuff going here. Martin Luther, the great reformer, he rejected 2 books that he didn't think should be in the Bible, the canon. One was Esther. Anyone know why Esther? I think this is a great answer. It's not once in the book of Esther is the word God appear. It's a story that is without God, except when you read the story, God is everywhere. He just doesn't announce who he is. He's pulling all the strings, but without a name. Then James. Martin Luther comes out of the Catholic Church, and the theology that he grows up with is that you do these meritorious works, and they advance you in the eyes of God. In James, when he sees this word works, he reacts so strongly because he's read Romans 3, where it's justification by faith alone, from first to last. So really what happens with Martin Luther in rejecting James, he's misread James. James is not talking about things that you do where you impress God or you are moving closer to God. It's more like this. He does use the word works, but it's more like this. Okay, if you're in a family, probably you have chores. Guys, you have chores. Jack, you have chores? Just say yes. Yes. You can even say yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's a stretch, right? All right. So you have things to do, but you don't do them so your parents will say, oh, that's a good kid. You do them because you're just part of the family. I think what James is saying is if you're part of the family of God through Jesus, this is what you're going to see. So what he's going to say, number one, it's not. I've got 2 negatives there because I just wanted to write not in big letters. It is not possible that a person who is saved will not have any accompanying evidence. He said if the Spirit of God is in you, you're going to see a change. So a friend of mine blew off half of his hand, like the Paul Pierre football player. July 4th, blowing up firecrackers on the waters outside of Bimini in his boat. Didn't throw this thing up, blew off his hand. They airlifted him to Jackson. Couldn't, there are no fingers to find. They fixed this thing, do surgery. He's in pain every day. And if he comes to me and says, well, I did all 3 of his daughter's weddings, actually. And when he came to me at the weddings and he says, man, my hand hurts. And you look at his hand and there's evidence of the power of the firecracker. If you know Christ, there is evidence of the power of the Holy Spirit. It's not something you should do. You just can't get away from it. So an example that he gives, and he gives other examples, a Christian should not ignore the needs you just won't. It doesn't mean you're going to do this one, but somehow if you know Christ and you see a brother or sister, and the people that he's talking to have claimed to know Christ, they may not. Like in here, I always say it'd be cool to have a tattoo that just says in, so you could know. But we've all claimed to know Christ, most of us in here. And if you know Christ, if I have a kid who's hungry, I feed them. If I have a car that needs gas, I fill it up. If I have a brother and sister in Christ who needs my help in one way or another, it's not even a choice. It's not something I should do. It's just something I do. Why? Because I'm a Christian. I'm part of the family. So then he says, but if you have faith, there's a guy named Zane Hodges, a generation ago. He taught at Dallas Seminary, and he wrote a book, Absolutely Free. And he said this: Christianity is only intellectual assent. If you just say, I believe in Jesus, you're a Christian. And John MacArthur, who just died, he wrote a book, the best thing I think he's written, called The Gospel According to Matthew. And in it, MacArthur said, no. What Hodges recommended or suggested was you become first a Christian and then you become a disciple. The lordship of Christ is a secondary step. MacArthur comes along and says, no, they're the same step. And if you don't have the lordship of Christ, you're not a Christian. They work together. And so for Hodges, it was almost the Holy Spirit was a second work of grace. He's saying, if you don't have any action, if there's nothing verifiable in your life, and there's not a list that you must do this, and there's not a time limit, you've got to do it in 30 days or you go straight to hell. But the term that he uses is corpse. The Ephesians 2 stuff, you're spiritually dead. If there's not evidence, so how would you know that you're a Christian? I think you look at the fruit. You say, but I still have so many areas in my life where I'm just a mess. Yeah, I'm sure. And you will. Because sanctification is a process that goes on until we meet Jesus. But there are areas that are beginning to change. The one person in my life that I used to pray that God would kill, because I'm such a good person. I felt so justified in praying for this guy's death. Dear God, if you are sovereign, take him home tonight. Take me home tonight. Yeah, that's how I prayed. And God's changed my heart to where I'm not an enemy anymore. And I pray that God blesses him in all that he does. That's not something I conjured up. Something God conjures up. And so James says, you're going to see it. It's not a fear factor. It's this is pretty cool. This is what you can look forward to.
Yeah. Why do you think, Jary, like James, he uses like a pretty practical example. Hey, if you see somebody without food or if you see somebody without clothes, take care of that. Why do you think he uses that as like the basis, the test of it?
You want to see what someone's heart is like. We sang that in the song. It's all about the heart. You want to see what someone's heart is like. Watch what they do. Mm-hmm. So it's only through actions that you get to see the heart. So who was I reading yesterday? Buffett says this, but someone else says this. If you want to know what someone's heart is like, see how they treat people who can't give them anything.
Yeah.
That is, go to a restaurant and see how do they treat the host or hostess. How do they treat little kids? How do they treat the homeless guy walking down the street? And so what James does is he hits the tongue, and he hits riches, and he hits even tough times in your life. And he says, these are important because Proverbs does them, but what Proverbs does is it takes it down to your heart, and James does the same thing. This is how you want to reveal your kid's heart? Tell them they can't go to the party they've been waiting to go to. And listen to how they respond. You'll know the heart. You know what your heart is like? Mine's the driving thing. That's where I still struggle. I drove to Miami yesterday, and I'm coming back, and I'm tired, and I'm thinking, just get out of the road. I don't care how fast you go. This is my lane. I ordered it early this morning, and it has my name on it, and you stay out of the way. And I'm driving along, and some bozo, I put it on cruise control, and I'm listening to something, and it's great. I got an hour to go. I can be home. And the Dolphins are on last night. It's a good life. And I'm driving along, and some bozo cuts me off. You want to know what my heart's like? It wasn't very good. So there you go. So what it's doing is Proverbs and James are both attempting in God's kindness to expose your heart, because only as you expose your heart can you become a person who is free. You don't worry about actions. Actions are secondary. Primary is motivation.
Mm-hmm. I really think this is probably a good place to put in a plug right here.
The what?
Put in a little plug for our ministries. We have several people in here. Man, you love to serve. You love to get involved with projects and helping people out, things like that. And it's awesome. It's fantastic to see you guys get together. If somebody, maybe you're sitting here and you're like, hey, I want to serve. I want to help people out. I want to, somebody has a need, I want to jump in and help doing that. I would love for you to fill out one of our connection cards in the seat back in front of you. Fill that out. Indicate, hey, I want to be a part of our missions team, and we can get you involved with that. Kyle Gum over there. Kyle's over there. See Kyle. Talk to him. Say, hey, Kyle, I want to be a part of our missions team. And Kyle is kind of our eyes and ears to needs in our community and in our congregation. And so if you'd like to get involved and be a part of that and letting your hands and feet of Jesus be in action, talk to Kyle or fill out a connection card. We'll get you plugged in for one of those. Sorry, that's a little
Or see me
commercial.
because you want to work with kids.
Yes. Yeah, we could definitely use some kids workers, yes. Jary needs some youth workers in the crew.
Always.
We need some kids workers in our kids ministry. I don't know if you guys know, we have literally physically outgrown our classroom with our kids ministry. Last week we had to, an emergency, that's a great thing. And so we had to, split the class up and actually put them in two different rooms. We had to pull somebody in to teach last minute. It was crazy. And so we're expanding those types of things, and that means we need more people to serve, more people to be a part of that. So, definitely we could use those types of things. But let's put all this together here, Jary. What's cool, I guess, is that when you put Proverbs and James side by side, is that you realize that they're really saying the same thing, just really kind of in different ways. Yep. Here, wisdom produces fruit and faith produces works. And again, both of those, they bring life in that. So, Jary, can you kind of explain what you think when you see Proverbs and James and how they overlap here?
Okay. Yeah, the goal is for heart change. Everything that God does in our life is tailor-picked in order that we might be free. Why must we be free? For eternity, we're going to be free. He's preparing us now for the way we're going to be for all of eternity. I've told you before, those of you, I'm sure somewhere in a sermon I said it, because one of my favorite things, when my kids were young, a woman said, don't treat them like they are, treat them like they will be when they're adults. God treats us like the adults he sees us as, not like the spiritual infants we tend to be. And so James, who knew the book of Proverbs and then knew Jesus, he grew up with Jesus. If anybody knew Jesus, it was James. And he understood he who was wisdom. It's fascinating to read James as he talks about the Lord Jesus Christ. And I think, man, that's your brother. I will not call him my brother God. Come on. And so it's really moving us towards freedom, but it's all about the Spirit. You don't work yourself into this. God's working. And so then what we did is we sort of ended here with some encouragement. As you look at, does this work? Yeah. As we do James and Proverbs together. First of all, Jesus is the living wisdom of God. And so wisdom isn't a thing, it's a person. We know wisdom. We have the spirit of wisdom in us. Secondly, then Jesus fulfilled everything written in the book of Proverbs. The righteous person in Proverbs, the hardworking person in Proverbs was Jesus. But so was the other side. For our sake, he became the fool. For our sake, he became... So all of Proverbs found its fulfillment in Jesus. Jesus understands Proverbs much more deeply than we could ever understand Proverbs. And then Jesus, then the wise king, has said, you're on my team. I want you to play for me. And so he's included us in his kingdom. Therefore, just two more here. Jesus has filled us with his Spirit. Why? Because we're on his team. When you come to know Christ, it's not a second work of grace. It is God's gift in order that we might become free, that we might be more like Jesus. Jesus, the only person who ever lived completely freely, never had a second thought about what he said or did because it was always the right thing. And so the book of Proverbs, and we could say the book of James then, they're an avenue for learning how to live by means of the power of the Spirit of Christ. Have you read Proverbs? And just some of the stuff it says. And you read that and you think, okay, talking about being lazy. Let's say I'm lazy. And you read it and you say, oh, okay, I can work with that. But really, it's not the issue outside, it's internal. And I think, here's what we do with it. Here's the last thing. Jesus' wisdom in the book of Proverbs, and we'll say James. As Christians, we read Proverbs. James, we hear what they teach. We seek to do what they say, but we know the Spirit of Christ is working in us towards that end as well. You want to be healthier? Jesus wants you to be healthier than you even want to be healthier. You want to be wiser? You want to be a better parent? You want to be a better spouse? A better employee? You want to laugh more? You want to enjoy life? You want to understand when things get tough, you're still safe? Jesus wants that in you more. It's like a parent wanting their kid to grow up, be potty trained much more than the kid wants to be potty trained. You're correct? Do you remember those days? Or you're living those days. God wants us to be free. It's Jesus who is the king. We're part of his kingdom. People ought to look at us on the one hand and say, I don't agree with what you teach, but man, I love your life. They ought to be so compelled by Christians. Remember what it said, the early Christians, they knew they were Christians by their love. People ought to look at us and say, man, I don't want to like you, but I really like you. You don't agree with me politically, you don't agree with me on so many areas, but there's something about you that is compelling. It's the wisdom of Christ through the Spirit of Christ that is turning us into the children that we are, that we can live and laugh and love, sorry, movie, and be the most compelling group of people in the entire world with the message of Jesus.
Yeah, that's so good. So here's the challenge, right? If our lives, if they're supposed to be a tree of life, means they're going to produce something. The challenge then becomes is, what is my life producing? And that's the question that every single one of us should be asking. Is what fruit is my life producing? That's what we should be looking at. So here's my challenge, my takeaway for all of us today. Is that when we leave here today and we go out about our days today, or even through our week through the next 7 days before we gather again, find some tangible way for you to be the hands and feet of Jesus, for you to be a tree of life for somebody else. Some way that you can serve somebody else, some way that you can encourage somebody else. Maybe you need to just write a note down to somebody that God puts on your heart, and just old-fashioned, like actually write it, and don't type it and put it in an envelope and put a little stamp on it and put it in the mailbox thing and send it to somebody. Once you do that, maybe that looks like, paying for somebody's food at a restaurant. And don't take the credit for yourself. Just say, hey, this is from the Lord. And give an opportunity to share the gospel. Some way that you can serve, some way that you can encourage somebody, some way that you can maybe meet somebody's need, or a way that you can actually share Christ with somebody else. That's the challenge. I think if every single one, could you imagine if every single one of us in this room went out and did something very tangible to be the hands and feet of Jesus this week? Can you imagine the impact we could make on Port St. Lucie? And so that's the challenge, is that we get out and we do that. Jerry, could you leave us with just some closing remarks, thoughts that you might have for us today?
I want to add to what you said. I think, that works. What can you be doing? I would also say the challenge is to look in your life and see already where God has produced fruit. Mm-hmm. Like, if you know Christ, there already is fruit. Sitting in the back there, I wanted to say hello to you. There's Cody. When I grow up, I want to be Cody. Cody is like cooler than I could ever be. But he's got this love for kids that I watch and I think, that's just not, there's something there that is bigger than just, I'm going to start crying here.
It wouldn't be a Jerry sermon.
Yeah. You know why? I'll tell you why. We have the privilege here of having a school that is a mission school. We've got kids that are coming from non-Christian families. They're coming here, their parents, who aren't necessarily Christians, are entrusting their children to us. Eddie teaches grace. Cody lives it out too. I mean, so what kids are seeing is the fruit of the Spirit in men. I'll say these men, I'm not picking on you women, sorry, who are exhibiting the wisdom of Christ because of the Spirit of Christ. So what's going on in your life? I bet you there's, if you could tell me in the last month ways you've changed and ways you've ministered, I bet you there's a bunch of really positive things happening within this room already. So you take this challenge, what else can I do? And you take that challenge, what already has God done, and you merge them together, and you've got James and you've got Proverbs sort of flipping back and forth on you.
Yeah, I think probably that perfect blend is when those come together, where we're not just doing it because, well, it was homework, we told you to go do it this week, but you're just doing it because it's the love of Christ just flowing through you.
You got it.
It's the fruit of Christ that, man, you're just so filled with the Spirit, you're just so filled with life in you that you can't help but to go out and be the hands and feet of Jesus, to go out and to meet people's needs, to be an encouragement to people, and that fruit is just naturally abounding in us. And I agree. I think we see that in Cody, and we see it in Eddie. We see it really in all of our teachers at SCA. They're fantastic people in the way that they love and minister. So today, faith, wisdom, it's not just about what you believe. It's about what you produce. It's about what's coming through you that produces life for other people. Again, not because we're doing it, but because it's Christ who's living in us. Let's pray.